I remember the first time Linda made me feel small. It was at a family dinner a month after our wedding. She looked at my dress and said it wasn't something a Reed wife would wear. Jason just laughed it off and told me not to take it personally. I convinced myself she would warm up to me with time. I kept trying to be respectful, hoping she would see I wasn't her enemy. Instead, the more I tried, the more she pushed. Jason and I had a small house outside Boston. I helped pay the mortgage and handled most of the bills because I believed marriage was about teamwork. He used to appreciate that. But after his mother started spending more time with us, he changed in little ways that I kept ignoring. He stopped asking how my day was. He spent more evenings out or sitting with her in the kitchen, whispering and laughing like I was an outsider in my own home. Linda commented on everything I did. If I cooked, she said her son liked things seasoned different. If I cleaned, she'd redo everything just to prove a point. She even went through my closet one day while I was at work and threw out what she called cheap-looking clothes. When I told Jason about it, he said she was only trying to help me fit in better with family expectations. I should have seen it then, but I kept choosing peace over confrontation. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I had lost my grandmother not long before all this, and I didn't have the energy to defend myself every day. Jason knew how close I was to her. He saw me cry over her things, but when I asked him to visit her gravesite with me on her birthday, he said his mother needed him to fix something in her apartment. I went alone. After that, I stopped sharing my feelings with him. He didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care to notice. Linda started treating our house like it was already hers. She'd invite people over without asking me. She'd move my things and tell me where I was allowed to put them. I tried to talk to Jason about setting boundaries, but he said I was being dramatic and ungrateful because his mother was just trying to support us. It got worse when Linda hinted that I couldn't give Jason what a real wife should. I didn't even know what she meant by that, but it stayed in my head for days. She criticized my job, saying nurses work too much and don't make enough to matter. She said I should quit and let Jason be the provider. When I told her I loved what I did, she said, "Women only work when their husbands can't handle responsibility." I started staying late at work, just to avoid the tension at home. Each time I walked through the door, I braced myself. Sometimes Linda would be sitting in the living room like she owned the place. Sometimes Jason would argue with me over things she brought up while I was gone. I felt like I was slowly disappearing from my own life. I held on because I believed marriage meant trying. I didn't know then just how far they were willing to go to push me out completely. When I first met Jason, I was working long shifts at the children's hospital. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but he came into my life so smoothly it felt natural. He brought me coffee on my breaks, asked about my day, and never made me feel like my job was an inconvenience. He used to say he admired how dedicated I was and that he respected a woman who could stand on her own feet. Back then, I believed every word. He'd wait for me outside the hospital after late shifts and drive me home just so I didn't have to take the train alone. He met my mother and treated her kindly. He even sent flowers when I got promoted. I thought I'd found someone who truly saw me and valued me. When he proposed, it felt like the right choice. My grandmother was happy for me, and that mattered to me more than anything. Things didn't change right away. It was slow, like a quiet leak. After the wedding, little comments started slipping out of him. At first I thought he was just joking or stressed. He'd say things like, "You don't need to work so hard now," or "You don't have to make decisions alone anymore." It didn't sound harsh, but it felt different from the man who once praised my independence. Then Linda came into the picture more directly. Before the wedding, she barely interacted with me, just polite smiles and short talks. After we got married, she acted like she had the right to inspect everything about me. She'd come over and criticize the way I folded towels or how I arranged the kitchen. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just her adjusting to her son's new life. But she didn't stop. One day, while I was making coffee, she said I looked like someone meant to stay in the background. She said it so casually, like she was stating a fact. Another time, after a family dinner, she told Jason within my earshot that I wasn't wife material because I didn't fuss over him enough at the table. Jason didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just let it happen. What hurt more was how he slowly started agreeing with her without saying it out loud. If she made a rude comment, he wouldn't argue. If I told him I didn't like how she spoke to me, he'd say things like, "That's just how she talks," or "Don't take everything so seriously." The same man who once supported my strength now treated me like I was overreacting to everything. I tried to keep the peace and stay focused on my marriage. I didn't want to create problems, so I stayed quiet more than I should have. I thought if I stayed respectful and didn't fight back, she'd ease up eventually. Instead, my silence made her bolder. She started showing up uninvited and making herself comfortable in our space. She'd make comments about future grandchildren and how she hoped they'd take after Jason's side, since some traits shouldn't continue. I knew what she meant. She wanted me to feel small, and she did it with a smile. Through all of this, Jason kept telling me to give her time and not make things bigger than they are. Each time he dismissed my feelings, it chipped away at the version of him I fell in love with. I kept waiting for the man who used to defend me and lift me up. I didn't realize he was already gone. My grandmother, Rose, was the one steady person in my life from childhood. My father left early, and my mother worked double shifts to keep us afloat, so most of my days were spent with Grandma. She taught me how to cook, how to manage money, and how to speak to people with respect even when they didn't show it back. She never raised her voice, but her words carried weight. I grew into the woman I am because of her. When I started nursing school, she was the one who encouraged me not to give up when classes got hard. She'd leave little notes in my bag telling me she was proud of me. On days when I came home exhausted and ready to quit, she'd make tea, sit with me, and remind me why I started. She never made me feel like a burden. As she got older, her health began to slip. The hospital visits became more frequent, and I took it on myself to make sure she never felt alone. I'd drive her to appointments, pick up her prescriptions, sit with her at night when she couldn't sleep, and handle the bills she was too tired to sort through. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because she had given me everything she could through the years. Jason knew she meant everything to me, but he didn't put in any effort to know her. When he met her, he was polite but distant. He'd make excuses not to visit. If I asked him to come with me, he'd act like it was too much of an inconvenience. Linda was worse. She called my grandmother old-fashioned and stuck in the past. She'd mock the way Rose dressed or spoke, pretending it was harmless teasing. I told her to stop more than once, but she always covered it with a laugh and said I was being sensitive. Even when Rose was in and out of the hospital, Jason never offered to come with me. He'd say things like, "You know, hospitals aren't my thing," or he'd claim he was too busy. I stopped asking after a while. I learned to drive there alone, sit with her through the night, and go to work half-rested the next day. I didn't complain. She was worth every minute. The night she passed, I was holding her hand. She didn't struggle or speak. She just closed her eyes and slipped away. I sat there in silence for hours after, numb and empty. When I called Jason to tell him, his first words weren't about her or me. He just asked if I'd be home soon because he didn't want to eat alone. I went to my mother's house afterward, not ready to walk into my own. Linda didn't even bother to hide how little she cared. She said, "At least you won't have to run around after her anymore." I didn't respond because I knew if I spoke, it wouldn't end well. I was heartbroken, but even then, I believed the worst was just the loss itself. I had no idea that my grandmother had left behind something that would change everything, something Jason and Linda never saw coming. After the funeral, I didn't have the strength to go back home right away. I packed a small bag and stayed with my mom for a few days. She didn't ask many questions. She just cooked for me, sat with me, and let me sleep whenever I needed to. Being in that house brought me some peace, even though my chest still ached every time I remembered that my grandmother was gone. Jason called me twice while I was there, but the conversations were short. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He only wanted to know when I planned to come back. I told him I needed a little more time, and he just said, "Okay, but don't stay too long. Things are piling up here." That was it. No comfort. No patience. Just a reminder that I was expected to fall back into place. When I finally returned home, something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The house smelled different. Things weren't where I left them. I walked into the living room and saw new decorations, things I didn't buy. My heart started racing, and I went straight to the bedroom. Drawers were open, clothes were moved, and some of my boxes were gone. Linda was in the kitchen, acting like she owned the place. She didn't look surprised to see me. She glanced at me and said, "You were gone long enough. Jason needs a wife who's present, not someone drowning in sadness." I ignored her tone and asked about the boxes that were missing from the closet. She told me she decluttered while I was away. When I checked the trash bins outside, I saw things that belonged to my grandmother. Scarves she knitted for me, letters she wrote, and a small wooden jewelry box she gave me when I graduated. Some of the items were broken, others stained with coffee, like someone had tried to ruin them on purpose. I confronted her, and she didn't even pretend to be sorry. She said, "You need to stop clinging to the past. Jason shouldn't come second to a dead woman's memory." Her words hit me so hard I could barely breathe. I asked where Jason was, and she said he was out getting dinner. When he came home, I showed him what she had done. I expected him to be upset, or at least try to understand why I was hurt. Instead, he looked at me like I was the problem. He said, "She was trying to help you move forward. You've been gone for days. Maybe this is what you needed." I stood there in disbelief. I told him she threw away things that couldn't be replaced. He shrugged and said I was getting emotional over objects. That was the first time I realized he wasn't just ignoring what she was doing. He agreed with it. When I tried to get the rest of my grandmother's things out of the trash, Linda grabbed my wrist and told me I was being dramatic. She said, "Jason comes first now. Act like a wife and let go of this grieving phase." I didn't cry in front of them. I picked up what I could save and stayed silent. But something inside me shifted that day. Losing my grandmother broke me, but watching them disrespect her memory lit a different kind of fire in me. I knew then that the love I thought I had in that house didn't exist anymore. Not long after the incident with my grandmother's things, the pressure in the house became harder to ignore. Linda had practically made herself a permanent fixture in our lives. She acted like my presence was optional, and Jason didn't do anything to stop her. One evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, Jason brought up something that caught me off guard. He said he thought it might be time for me to quit my job. At first, I thought he was joking. I asked him why he would even suggest that. He said his mother believed that a man should provide and that a wife should focus on the home. I told him calmly that I loved my work and that I wasn't giving it up because someone else thought it didn't fit their idea of a marriage. He didn't argue at that moment, but the look he gave me said everything. It wasn't disappointment, it was irritation. From that day, the distance between us grew in ways I couldn't pretend not to see. Jason started keeping his phone on silent and face down. Before, he never cared if I used it to check the time or answer a call, but now he kept it in his pocket or took it with him even when he went to the bathroom. I didn't go searching through his things, but his sudden secrecy didn't sit right with me. I also noticed he stopped using our joint bank card as often. Instead of regular transactions, there were cash withdrawals I didn't recognize. When I asked him about them, he brushed it off and said he needed money for errands. He never explained what those errands were. Linda became even more comfortable speaking over me. She'd whisper with Jason in the kitchen or living room, and as soon as I entered, the conversation would stop. They would glance at each other and then change the subject to something unimportant. It was obvious they were hiding something, but I didn't know what. One afternoon, I walked in earlier than usual because my shift ended early. As I opened the front door, I heard their voices from the dining room. Jason was speaking low, and Linda said, "She'll leave it all behind if you handle it right." I stepped inside before I heard more. They both went silent instantly. Linda started stacking magazines like she had been organizing them all along, and Jason pretended he was checking something on his phone. I asked what they were talking about. Jason said it was nothing that concerned me. His tone was flat, like he was talking to a stranger. Linda gave me a look that told me she enjoyed every second of my confusion. I didn't push the conversation further, but I felt the divide getting wider. Every time I entered a room they were in, the energy changed. When the phone rang and Jason answered, he'd walk outside or into another room. His messages started appearing with lock screen previews turned off. I tried to hold on to the hope that maybe I was reading too much into it, but deep down I knew something was shifting, something planned, not accidental. I stopped expecting kindness, and I started paying closer attention. Every withdrawal, every whisper, every unfinished sentence told me more than their words ever did. I didn't know exactly what they were planning, but I could feel it moving closer, like a storm I wasn't supposed to see coming. About a week after Jason asked me to quit my job and the secretive behavior started, I got a call I never expected. I was on my lunch break at the hospital when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but I answered anyway. It was my grandmother's attorney. His tone was calm and respectful, but what he told me didn't feel real at first. He explained that my grandmother had left behind her entire estate in my name. Not just a house or some savings, everything. There were 2 properties in her hometown, land she inherited from her parents, and several long-term investments she had built over the years. The total value was around $30 million. I didn't speak for a few seconds because I couldn't process it. I knew she was responsible with money, but I never imagined she had that kind of wealth. He asked me to come to his office to go over documents and discuss the transfer. I told him I'd be there the next morning. When I hung up, I just sat there in the hospital break room, staring at the wall. I felt a wave of emotions all at once: grief, shock, gratitude, and confusion. I didn't cry, but my hands shook for a while. I thought about all the years she lived simply, never showing off, never talking about money like it mattered. She wore the same coat for years, used coupons, patched old quilts, and talked about saving instead of spending. I used to tease her gently about how careful she was. Now I understood she wasn't just being frugal, she was building something quietly. I didn't tell Jason anything when I got home that evening. He barely looked at me when I walked in, and honestly, I didn't feel the need to share anything with. I wanted time to understand what this meant and what I was supposed to do next. For the first time in a long time, I felt like something in my life belonged only to me. That night, while Jason and Linda were in the living room whispering again, I stayed in the bedroom and wrote down everything the attorney said. I made a list of questions to ask him the next day. I didn't feel comfortable speaking about it out loud, especially in that house. I knew deep down that if Jason and his mother found out too soon, they'd twist it into something that benefited them. The next morning, I took off work and went to the attorney's office. He showed me the documents, titles, account statements, legal letters my grandmother wrote before she passed. She had planned it all carefully. She even left a letter for me, sealed in an envelope. I read it in the car before driving home. She wrote about trusting me, about wanting me to live without fear or limits. She said she hoped I would use what she left the way I used my heart, with care and strength. I held that letter like it was the only solid thing in my life. I didn't feel the need to tell anyone, not yet. The house I was living in didn't feel safe enough for that kind of truth. I decided to stay quiet and think. I didn't know then how soon everything would fall apart around me, but I already sensed that silence was my protection. I went home with a calm face, and no one in that house had a clue how much had just changed. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, nothing seemed out of place from the outside. The lights were on, and Jason's car was there. I felt tired but calm, still thinking about everything the attorney had shown me earlier that day. I took a deep breath and walked inside, expecting the usual cold silence. Instead, I stopped in the doorway. Jason and Linda were sitting on the couch like they were waiting for a meeting to start. At first, I didn't understand why they were both staring at me with that stiff look. Then my eyes shifted to the corner of the room, and I saw my suitcases lined up like someone was about to take a trip. They were packed neatly, clothes sticking out of the edges, some things folded wrong, others crammed in like they were rushing. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to explain. He stood up and said it in such a plain voice that it didn't feel real at first. He said his mother was moving in for good, and that I no longer fit into their plan. Those were his exact words. Like I was a piece of furniture they'd decided to toss out. I didn't move or speak right away. I just watched his face, trying to see a hint of hesitation or guilt, but there was nothing. Linda didn't even bother pretending she wasn't enjoying it. She got up slowly, walked over to the coffee table, and picked up my wedding ring. I didn't even know she had taken it off the dresser. Without saying a word at first, she tossed it onto the floor so it landed near my feet. Then she said, "You never added anything to this family anyway." The sound of the ring hitting the tile was louder than it should have been. I didn't pick it up. I didn't cry. I felt my body go cold, like I was watching everything from outside myself. I asked Jason if he was serious. He didn't look ashamed, just annoyed that I was questioning it. He said it was best for everyone, and that I should leave peacefully instead of dragging things out. I glanced at the suitcases again. They'd gone through my things without my permission. I could tell Linda had done most of the packing. Half of what mattered to me was missing. She didn't pack any of my grandmother's photos, letters, or jewelry. I asked where the rest of my belongings were, and she shrugged and said, "We kept what belonged here. The rest is clutter." I didn't argue. I walked past both of them and picked up my purse from the hook by the door. Jason told me I could take the suitcases now or come back tomorrow, but I wouldn't be welcomed in the house after that. I didn't respond. I didn't give them the reaction they expected. Before I stepped out, Linda called out behind me and said, "You should be grateful we're not making this messy." I didn't turn around. I didn't look at Jason again either. I left the house without taking the suitcases. I didn't need anything they touched. I drove to the same hotel I had stayed in before, but this time I didn't feel broken. I felt something else, quiet, sharp, and controlled. They thought they were ending something. They had no idea what was waiting on the other side of their decision. I didn't take anything with me when I left the house. Not the suitcases they packed, not the ring Linda threw, not even a change of clothes. I just took my purse, my keys, and my phone. I walked out without looking back, and the silence in my chest felt stronger than any words I could have spoken to them. I drove straight to a hotel nearby, checked in, and locked the door behind me. I didn't cry or fall apart. I just sat on the edge of the bed for a while and let the quiet settle around me. The next morning, I went back to the attorney's office like we planned. He had everything ready. The transfer of the assets was completed, and the documents were updated with my name on everything my grandmother left behind. 2 properties, land, accounts, and investments, all officially mine. He walked me through each step, and I signed where he told me to sign. When it came to the investments, he recommended I speak with a financial advisor to secure everything and make sure no one could touch it but me. He set up a meeting the same afternoon. I didn't tell anyone where I was or what I was doing. I didn't answer Jason's messages either. He had sent a few short texts asking if I planned to get my things. He didn't ask where I was staying or how I was feeling. It was all about convenience for him. By the time I met with the financial advisors, I was calmer and more focused. We talked about moving the funds into new accounts under my name only and restructuring the assets, so everything was protected legally. They explained things step by step, and for once I didn't feel small or pushed aside. I had control, even if no one else knew it yet. I listened carefully, signed more papers, and made decisions that would have scared me a few years ago. But in that moment, it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like I was finally doing something for myself without waiting for someone else's permission. After the meetings, I went back to the hotel and ordered food. I sat by the window and thought about my grandmother and how she planned all of this quietly. She trusted me with what she built, and I understood now why she never talked about money. She knew the people around me didn't value me the way she did. Jason still had no idea about any of it. He probably thought I was sitting somewhere crying and trying to figure out where to go next. He had no clue that while he and his mother packed my clothes and tossed my ring, I was becoming the owner of more than they could imagine. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't tell my mom yet either. I wanted to keep everything steady until I knew what my next step would be. I didn't feel lost or scared anymore. I felt clear. They had pushed me out of their lives without knowing what I was walking into. They thought they'd taken everything from me. They had no idea I was just getting started. Within a few days, I met with a new attorney and explained everything to him. I told him I wanted a divorce and that I didn't plan to waste any time. He asked for the details, and I gave him the facts calmly. No drama, no long stories. He started the paperwork right away and made sure everything was filed properly, so there would be no delays. While he handled the legal side, I went to the bank and removed Jason's access to our joint accounts. Most of the money in there had come from my salary anyway, and I wasn't going to let him or Linda touch a cent now that they pushed me out. The accounts were frozen to him, and new ones were opened in my name only. I didn't leave anything behind for them to use. The house was another issue I settled quickly. Even though Jason liked to act as if it was his family home, I was the one who paid the mortgage from the beginning. My income covered the down payment, the monthly bills, and the upkeep. My name was the one on the deed. My attorney confirmed that I had every right to make decisions about the property, so I put it up for sale immediately. The real estate agent arranged the listing and started the process before Jason even realized what was happening. I didn't warn him, and I didn't feel guilty. He and his mother made it clear that I didn't belong there, so I treated the house like what it legally was, mine to handle. Once everything was in motion, my attorney had the divorce and eviction papers prepared. We chose the same day to have both sets delivered. Jason and Linda were still living in the house, acting as if they had won, when the process server showed up at the door. Jason was handed the divorce petition along with notice that he had no rights to the bank accounts. Linda received the eviction notice with a deadline to leave the property. Their names were on nothing. They had no claim to the house, no access to the money, and no control over my decisions. I didn't go there myself to see their reaction. I didn't call, text, or argue. I stayed in the hotel and waited for my attorney to confirm that the documents were delivered. When he told me it was done, I simply said thank you and went on with my day. There was no satisfaction in getting revenge. What I felt was relief. They pushed me out thinking I had nowhere to go and nothing to offer. They believed they could decide my place in their lives and shut the door behind me. But now the door they tried to close on me was closing on them instead. They were being removed from the house they tried to keep me out of, and the divorce they thought I wouldn't dare to file had already begun before they even knew it. I didn't yell, fight, or return to explain myself. I let the papers speak for me. After the papers were served, everything started to unravel on their side. Linda was the first to call. She didn't ask what happened or try to understand anything. She went straight into shouting, saying I had destroyed their lives and left them with nothing. She blamed me for the house being sold and for the money being out of their reach. I listened to the voicemail once and deleted it. There was nothing to say to her. Jason reached out after that. His tone was completely different from the day he told me I no longer fit into their plan. He didn't sound angry or confident anymore. He sounded scared. He said we could fix things and that he had acted under pressure. At first, he pretended not to know about the inheritance, but once he saw the information through the divorce filings, his messages changed. He suddenly wanted to talk, to meet, to start over. I didn't reply to him either. I didn't block either of them at first. I just chose silence. Their words meant nothing to me anymore. I had already left that life behind the moment I walked out with just my car keys. Now they were the ones scrambling for stability, and I wasn't going to step back in to save them. By the time their calls stopped, I had already signed the closing papers on a quiet lakeside property in May. The house sat near calm water, surrounded by trees, with no one around to question my choices or tell me what I should be. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I furnished it slowly, choosing things that made me feel comfortable instead of worrying about anyone's opinion. I didn't make any public announcement about the divorce or the inheritance. I didn't involve friends or explain myself to anyone. I changed my number, set up new accounts, and moved forward with my plan. My lawyer handled all communication, and I never looked back at the house I once shared with Jason. As for Jason and Linda, they were left with exactly what they tried to force on me, the suitcases they packed. No house, no money, no title, no control. The home was sold, and the proceeds were mine. They had to move out and find somewhere else to stay. Whatever story they told people didn't matter to me anymore. I didn't get satisfaction from their downfall, but I also didn't feel guilt. They made choices based on greed and disrespect, assuming I had nothing to offer and nowhere to go. They pushed me aside thinking they were winning something. In the end, I built a new life without them, a life they never imagined I could have. I spent my mornings by the water, made plans for my future, and focused on my own peace. While they argued, blamed, and begged, I moved on quietly, leaving them with the consequences of their actions and nothing more.